back to JS Podcast. Today I have Jaycie Cormac with me. Jaycie is a storytelling rebel and a speaker coach where she coaches others about storytelling, as far as I understand. So welcome, Jaycie. How are you?
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
So yeah, so glad you were able to join, and definitely interested in storytelling because telling stories helps us to kind of um, express ourselves in a way, right? That's
Mhm.
one form, but it also enables us to communicate better, whether it's in business or in other ways. Um, Explaining something in a story form helps the other person to remember it better. So definitely interested in that topic. But before we kind of get into that, can you tell us a little bit about who you are today? What kind of hats are you wearing? What are you doing?
Well, I've been on stage and put people on stage most of my life. And I've been an entrepreneur since I was just a baby. I was 18. I am 53 now. So let's not even do the math. So I've always worked basically for myself. Sometimes I joke and say I'm unemployable because I've just always worked for me. So being on stage in whatever capacity. My first company was a dance studio, and that is telling stories. It's obviously different than orally telling stories, but it's being in the theater and being on the physical stage. So, and having taught dance all those years as the instructor, I there were stories to tell, even just to get the kids to learn and to bond with them. And I didn't just teach kids, but overall. And then I've worked with authors all over the world. I used to run an international book award contest as well. So this is actually my fourth company that I'm working on now. So that's
Okay.
me in a nutshell.
So you've been through kind of the entrepreneurial life quite a bit already.
Yes, I've had the amazing financial success and the terrible financial catastrophe. So, years ago we did lose everything when I was married at the time, and we went through the recession here in the United States in 2008, and we lost I had sold my studio already for a profit, but we lost the bowling center and the bar we had and the rental properties. Stuff happens and we had to start over. So, yeah, I know
Mhm.
both sides, the roller coaster of being an entrepreneur.
Yeah, definitely. We'll ask some questions about that, kind of how you've recovered and so on. But before jumping into that, could you kind of let us know a little bit more about who were you when you were younger, like when you were in middle school and high school? Were you outgoing? Were you more kind of reserved? Like who was Jaycie back then?
So yeah, you wouldn't know today because I don't know a stranger, but I'm going to back up a little tiny bit farther than middle
Sure.
school originally, because at 6 years old, I was one of the kids that happened to be chosen in just my classroom in first grade to be, I was one of the goats from the Three Billy Goats graph. And so I had a paper bag mask over my head, and I only had to say 3 words in front of the classroom. I couldn't. I was
Oh.
petrified, physically frozen. I never could say, let me pass. I couldn't say it. I was supposed to get over the bridge, right, from the troll.
Mm.
And I couldn't. But a year later, that's when I was really on stage consistently. And by the time that I was a cheerleader in high school, which was middle school when I first became a cheerleader, and at the same time, my main dance instructor had asked me to start assistant teaching. It put me in front of people and speaking, and just the more you do it over and over, it becomes a lot easier. And then over the years, I've just continued to be in those positions and leadership roles, and always in front of people, and led self-defense workshops even for women. I've done a lot of things, and I just don't know a stranger. I can talk to anybody and pretty much strike up a conversation today. But
Hmm.
boy, not back then. I was scared to death.
So you're doing some cheerleading in middle school. Did you play any sports in high school?
I was the dancer and the gymnast. So I was so busy and I was on the competitive team. So, and that was at my dance studio that I was at. And it was a big dance studio, and I was one of the top dancers. So really, really busy. So squeezing in cheerleading and boys, and I was an honor student. And so you squeeze all that in with an already busy schedule. I didn't have time for a whole lot.
Yeah. What was your, so you were doing dance competitions and so on. So were your friends all kind of in that circle as well?
Nope, they just weren't. My friends just, well, and I actually took dance classes in the neighboring town. I lived in a small town and, kind of out in the country. I grew up in Indiana. And so I don't think there was anybody from my high school and regular school system that I even danced with for very long at all. So it was just a different, I was in with the neighboring kids, neighboring town. And so, and cheerleading, as much as I loved it, when we were that age, sorry girls if you hear this someday, but when we were there, it was unfortunately whoever was the last cheerleader to show up to the game. Of course, we all had to be there before the game started, but whoever showed up last, she was talked about. And I hated
Mm.
that. So, no, those weren't my best circle of friends. My friends were, I don't know. I sometimes was better friends with the kids that weren't as, I don't want to say not as popular. They weren't that clique because I
Hmm.
didn't really fit into that because I'm a rebel. I'm a little different. So I had a different group of friends.
So you did really well. You were in honors classes. Did you decide to go to college afterwards?
I didn't at first because I
Okay.
opened my dance studio. It was a like, oh, do I go to college? Do I do this? And so it just so happens that back in those days, I'm going to age myself again here, but back in those days, we ordered things from the catalog, right? And you had to go to the store and pick it up when it was delivered. It didn't come to the house. So I remember going to the J.C. Penney store with
Hmm.
my mother, and to get your packages, you had to go to the basement. That's where the counter was for that. And the lady there, something was said about me teaching dance. And at that point, I was already teaching. I had graduated high school and I was teaching a few students in the side yard of my parents' home, my childhood
Hmm.
home. And she said to me, if you'll open an actual dance studio, I'll bring my daughters to you. That's all it took for me. Bam. A year later, I opened the physical doors or the doors to my physical dance studio. She never brought her daughters,
Oh,
but I was very, very successful. So I'm not sure I answered your question. I think I got off on a tangent.
yeah. You mentioned you did go to college
Oh, college.
afterwards. Yeah.
Yes. So 30 by then, and I had always wanted my psychology degree, and so that was when I decided to go back. And once I was determined to graduate with high honors, and I did. I graduated summa cum laude because it just so happens that I'm academically really intelligent. That does not mean we're smart in everything we do, but when it comes to that, I did well with it. So then I ended up getting my master's in transpersonal psychology and eventually actually ended up getting my PhD in transpersonal counseling. So all of those things benefit me now, even
Hmm.
though it's storytelling, right? Because it's really understanding who we are and who we're talking to.
Yeah. So you're definitely well educated, and you've gone through kind of multiple iterations of starting businesses. What would you say was kind of your contribute like a big contributing factor to putting you on that path of wanting to start businesses or yeah, basically like starting businesses?
Well, sometimes people ask you, like, well, what was your dream when you were a child? And I'm like, I achieved mine. So what do I do now? But when I was right as I had switched from that moment of complete, terror and not being able to speak in front of the class, and then being on stage constantly after that, that was when I had that dream that I wanted to own my own dance studio. I fell in
Hmm.
love with it, doing it so much. And as a junior probably in high school, we had to sit down and talk to our guidance counselor. And this was central Indiana. It was very conservative. And I'm a 70s baby. So us women still weren't always encouraged to go do big things, sometimes, but
Hmm.
not always. So I remember my guidance counselor having a conversation with me. What classes are you taking for your senior year? And I ended up sharing with him, I wanted to open my dance studio. I had some thoughts about college and some ideas, but I wanted to open the dance studio. And he said, No, because you won't be able to do that. He said, you just need to be a secretary.
Wow.
Uh-huh. And I don't remember exactly what I said to him. I really don't. It left a mark because I remember that. And I don't think he was very happy with me when I left his office, but I was just like, yeah. And so what? A year and a half later, I opened the studio. So I think I am that Gen X woman that when you tell me I can't do it, I'm probably going to go do it.
Yeah.
Because there's just that drive. And then there is that part of me that I'm such a natural leader. I love that. And hey, if I drop the ball, it's on me, right? It's my fault. I got a lot of people relying on me. So I like that position and I can handle that. And so it really wasn't, I don't think for me, a far stretch to just say, well, I'm going to do it. I'm going to open the studio. And I just loved it. And from there, then, as I said, I was married eventually, and um, we ended up buying the bowling center and the bar. And after that, even though after we lost all of that, then I was so passionate about writing and books, and it's just been something I'd always really enjoyed. And being in those leadership roles, and I don't know exactly what led me to launch the book award contest. I don't remember, but I did it and just enjoyed again being in that space and coaching others what I knew how to do. And so it was
Yeah.
just from one step to the next, right?
Yeah. Where do you get your motivation, or what drives you, or what drove you even back then?
When we, now we're getting into a little bit of psychology, but I won't use jargon, I promise. When we can make other people feel good, when we help them, we are really reward ourselves because
Hmm.
we get those feel good hormones released and those different oxytocin and endorphins and all those different chemicals in the body because we've helped someone else. So when you get that dopamine hit and all those things, it feels good. It becomes addictive. You want to do it again, and it's a good way to have an addiction so that yeah, you just want to go do it again. And you're not afraid to step outside the bounds and to do something else and to just be dream bigger and bigger. And being on stage is a huge part of what supported me, though, in being able to pivot quickly. When something
Hmm.
goes wrong or you've dropped the ball, you forget what your next step is supposed to be. I've been there. The music is ready to start, and I'm like, I have no idea what the first step is. But when the music hit, I was fine. So it just gave me such a skill set that
Hmm.
applies so well into being an entrepreneur, into being a leader, that it just, for me, didn't feel like a big leap. And I would rather be the leader, not from an arrogant perspective, but because I'm always willing to grow and I want to support people, not as a boss to them, but as a leader and to really lift them up and help them grow. So I would rather be in that role than being just like, do this, do that, and there's no room to grow
Hmm.
kind of experience. And I've had some bosses, of course, over the years, but for the most part, I've been um, in some sort of leadership role.
Hmm. When it comes, it seems like what you're saying about helping others makes you, or makes the person who's helping others feel better, and it becomes more motivating through the different, like, dopamine and whatever other things in our brain, right? What would you say to somebody like today? It seems like there's a lot of young adults, kids, teenagers, where they're, I don't know if it's electronics or what is causing it. A lot of people are saying that it's electronics, just being online, just comparing themselves to somebody else. And now they've lost all that motivation because they didn't really do anything for anybody. Just using that as an example. And they want to feel like what the other person looks like they're feeling on Instagram or whatever else, but they're not feeling it, and they don't seem to have any motivation at all. Like, how would you recommend for them to restart or get out of that kind of mode?
I can't believe, I mean, a part of me wants to say, I can't believe I'm going to say this, but I'm just adamant about it. They need to get away from some of the devices. And I don't mean to sound old, but we can't just be behind that. We need the in-person communication. We need to be out. I have a Gen Z son, right? He'll be 17 here in just a few weeks. And then I have one that's a millennial. So
Mhm.
they're quite different. But even though he's very motivated on certain things, and both of my boys, as well as myself, are ADHD. So that's a challenge in of itself. But you have to get away from that and get out in the world and be around other people and see what it's about and experience that. But you also, more than anything, you have to find whatever it is that you yourself are passionate about, something that you truly love. And it takes practice, it takes time to get to that point where you just don't really care what Susie or Bob over here is doing. It's about you in a positive way so that you're fulfilled. Because when you are a brighter light, when your cup is full, you're better able to lift other people up. And you'll just have more fun in life, which makes you want to keep doing more for others. It's a tough one. I mean, I won't say it's not a tough one. I see my amazing son, my youngest one, and I'm like, wow, they're so different. Like, they're so different. But I happen to be a person that I like TikTok. It's kind of my go-to to just relax. I don't usually post anything on it right now, but it's one that's that instant gratification, and we just
Right.
keep scrolling, and you can get sucked into it for too long and lose track of the world around you. So though I like it, I'm not saying it's a positive either. So
Yeah.
I think there has to be a balance.
Yeah. And it seems like maybe it's hard for them initially to do things because they're in their head thinking like, okay, I need to fix myself. How do I fix it? How do I get out of this mode? Or what do I need to do? Like they're focusing on I, right? Not on others. When others is the answer in a way, like
Mm-hmm.
doing something for others, then it will help you as well. But they're like, oh, I'm depressed, I'm this, I'm that. And it like, yeah, I don't know.
Well, and I think some of it, and this is not my area of expertise, but what we eat, how we are
Mhm.
physically, are we getting physical exercise because that burns off toxins in the body? It just that releases the oxytocin and all kinds of the feel good hormones, right? So all of those things can change us physically and mentally and emotionally and spiritually. So it absolutely transform us. And because you have to want to help someone, because if not, you might not be
Right.
very nice about it, right? So once you've done it and you get that good reward and they just make you feel like, a rock star or whatever because they're so grateful, then again you go, oh yeah, that felt good, I want to do that again.
Yeah. So okay, so we'll transition to something else. Well, back to your life. When after the dance studio, you had that for a while, and did you sell it or did you like stop doing it? Like what happened then?
Yep, I had it for 16 years and then I sold it for a profit. It was just time. I
Hmm.
was working on my or excuse me, I was on my undergrad still. I hadn't finished that. I took a break anyways, it doesn't matter. I had my mother had cancer, and so there were some things. But I really wanted a second child, and there's a big age gap between my sons. And so I just ended up selling it and retiring from teaching before I ended up having my almost now 17-year-old. So we had already purchased our bowling center and our bar at that point, though. So I know what it's like to have, no joke at all, but 100-hour weeks. They were
Hmm.
50 hours at the studio, 50 hours at the bowling center, and my then husband was hitting like 90 hours at the bowling center. So when we would hit summer and it was the downtime, we're like, oh, part-time work. We're only working like 40 hours. Everybody else that's full time. So I was very hard worker, always have been. So, but the bowling center was unfortunately with such overhead. That's very expensive business to run. And unfortunately, when we hit the recession within a couple of years in a small town that lost 3 factories, blue collar workers are typically your bread and butter when it comes to bowling. And so, yeah,
Yeah.
there's only so much you can do, and only hang on for so long until the ship finally sinks.
Yeah. What was it like to work with your husband in terms of the entrepreneurial kind of businesses? What was your day to day like? What were the highs, the lows?
Sometimes we did really great together. We were married for 16 years. So sometimes we did great. We had some fantastic, fun, and amazing times, but we didn't always see eye to eye. He had
Hmm.
grown up in the bowling industry. His family had owned that before. It was out of the family, and then we brought it back into the family. But so he didn't always want to, if I had a new idea or something, we didn't always mesh on that
Hmm.
because, I was looking at it with fresh eyes. And yeah, we just, you know, I don't want to down him now. We've been divorced like 7 years, but there were good times. There were absolutely good times. And I think some people can work with their spouse really well, but it can cause a lot of struggle and make your personal time difficult because it's hard when you're running a business together. It's difficult then to step away from it and just have a normal personal life because it's always on your mind. To me, being an entrepreneur, my business is almost always on my mind anyway. But that was challenging. I remember when we were doing, and I had the dance studio at that time and the bowling center. And Saturday afternoons, we had one of the guys that worked for us. He would run the place for 2 or 3 hours, and that was our time that we would take and go have dinner. And it was our favorite place to go was the local pizza place. It's kind of the one everybody loved in our hometown. But we literally would both fall asleep in the booth waiting for our pizza because so there was no conversation. We are like, you're out. You're like, oh, wait, the pizza's here. And then we were at the bowling center again to finish up the evening. So yeah, that's so as I built this new company, this brand new one I'm working on, it's completely this time around is being designed around my life, not the other way around.
Hmm. What would you say if you were to kind of go back in life or in time to when you were married? What advice would you give yourself back then?
I would have divorced him sooner.
Oh yeah.
Let's just be straight. Yeah.
What was
Again,
the
I'm not going to
reasoning? Like,
down him. Well, I am pretty open about things, but there were just things I
mhm,
later found out that would be considered psychologically abusive to my oldest son, which was not his son, and to me. And
mhm,
it went on for a long time. And at the time, I didn't catch all of it. And later, I, figured it out and went, oh my gosh. So I would have left sooner, but it would have been messy because at that time we would have still had our bowling center. So it would have been much more complicated in a way. The emotional healing that I had to do when I finally did pull the plug on that and file for divorce and all those things, the emotional healing took years to get my big personality back and my confidence and trusting in my decision making and all that. It took a lot longer than it should have.
mhm,
And I think that had I not stayed, because they always say don't stay for the kids, this, that, or the other. But had I not stayed as long as I did, which was years longer than I really wanted to, I think that would have been better for me. So
mhm. Do you think there was some kind of um, something that your ex-husband could have done to change himself, or was he on any kind of path to maybe he didn't realize what he was kind of acting, the way he was acting, or was it more intentional?
oh, it was intentional. The things that he did were straight up intentional.
Hmm.
Hmm. Very, very specific things that were very intentional. And why? I don't know. I'm not gonna label him
Yeah, no, no.
because that's
I was
right,
just curious, like if it was
right.
something that, Like
No, there
some
were
people, some people know
specific
they have
things.
flaws and they want to like improve themselves, and others may not see their own flaws or something like that. So I was
I would
not
say
sure.
that it was intentional and he didn't see that it was an issue,
Hmm.
even though I still boggles my mind how you would think that those things were okay. But
Yeah. So after you got divorced, you started a new business, or what did you do after that?
I had the author's company with him. It was my baby, but we were running it together to a point. And so I chose to dissolve that. The judge gave me control of it, and I wrapped everything up in a few months, and then I dissolved it because I didn't want to remain partners or buy him out. So
Hmm.
I took time after that to just do independent contracting. I've done a few different things. I've led ghost tours. Of course, that puts me kind of on stage.
Hmm.
I've written ghost written a book for someone. I've done a lot of different things that I just enjoyed, and I still to this day do Instacart, which is grocery delivery. I'm not shy about it anymore. I used to be like, oh, people think, but now I'm like, no, it's fun. And that's that feel good because you get to help people, especially where I
Hmm.
live, because it's the place that I do that at is a very, very big retirement community. So it's amazing to be able to help so many people. And process of all of this, I took the time to really think about where I wanted to go and how I wanted to grow a new company and what I wanted that to look like because I knew I would do that again.
Hmm.
And as I said, putting on people on stage, being on stage, knowing how to coach as well as I do, and the understanding of story. And then I finally started figuring out that everybody wanted to go, Jaycie, you're so funny. And how can we be funny and entertaining with our stories and to get clients, and how do we do that? And so that's where that kind of all evolved.
So what are some tips would you have for somebody who wants to be more entertaining, more kind of engaging with their customers or clients or people around them in general?
The very first thing that I think people need to really understand is humor is subjective, right? What
Hmm.
you laugh at is not necessarily going to be the same thing I laugh at, or I might get a chuckle out of it, but you might not fall down on the floor like your stomach hurts, you're laughing so hard. So that's really important. And one thing I'm really adamant about with clients is that if you laughed at it, if whatever thing that happened to you or something that you saw that was funny in some way to you, then it's probably going to feel the same, similarly, anyways, to your right people because
Hmm.
they are going to have a similar energy that resonates with you. So don't try to tell some silly dad joke, which some of those can be pretty funny, right? If told well.
Hmm.
But don't try to pull off some joke if it's just not something you would normally say or not a story you would normally tell. And
Hmm.
your stories that you get to weave into, whether it's networking or whether it's your marketing or whether it's being on stage or a podcast interview, can come from anything. It doesn't have to be directly related to some big snafu or something with your business. It doesn't have to be that you fell down on stage. So I'm always, and I tell my clients this, always be on the lookout. When something in your life happens that might be a shocking moment, then still there's a way to bring some chuckles or some laughs around that. Normally, not tragic stories, obviously, but there's still a way to bring that out. Then you get into the technical. It's like you can't just tell the story. It comes about the delivery and the
Yeah.
presentation of it. So there's obviously that aspect that gets brought into it.
So what are some things about the delivery? And especially like if you're coaching more of somebody who's an introverted or kind of more introverted than extroverted, I think I mean, some introverts kind of work through it and they become great public speakers and so on. But if somebody who hasn't been speaking in public or kind of sharing things in like in front of people, and then they're nervous or they're just kind of unsure of themselves, plus whenever they're like in front of people their mind kind of goes blank, right?
Oh yeah,
what,
of course.
what advice would you give them?
So I'm going to go back briefly. As I said, when I was really little, right, I couldn't say whatever. But it took me, when I did my solo dance performances, and I started young, as I said, it took me until I think I was either 14 or 15 where I didn't forget my solo routine. But no one
Hmm.
ever knew. For me, I was able to pull it off. Judges, audience, they never knew. I just made up my own thing. I improv'd the entire time. My mom and my main instructor and choreographer were the only ones that knew the difference. So I just kept going. But it's practice. It's going over it and over it and over it, because do have that capability to just improv and talk about whatever. But most people don't naturally have that. And I'm not saying it's bad or good. It's just, it's not normal to do that. I don't know. Maybe I'm just weird. But so practice it, go over it, but don't make it sound like you're reading it, right? Get it so that it sounds like you're telling it at the water cooler, or you rushed home to tell your partner or whatever. You're like, you're not going to believe what happened today. And so then not only is it practicing it prior to, but doing it over and over. The first time you do it in front of people or in front of one person is not going to be as good as the 20, 30, 40 time you do it. So it's just doing it over and over. It gets easier, but as big of a personality as like I have, and there's many, many famous people we could mention, that they're still very nervous when they're going to
Hmm.
step in front of a brand new crowd they've never been in front of before. It's nerve wracking. And so you may get the butterflies, but learning how to understand and recognize that those butterflies are the exact same energy as excitement. So if you can go, okay, I'm just really excited to go talk about whatever it is. And then,
Yeah.
like I said, just doing it over and over and over. Um, my ADHD kicked in because, oh, the other thing there, it is learning to change your voice levels, right? I'm not talking monotone. I'm very animated, which I know you can see me here, but even if it were just audio, I change the inflection of my voice. I kind of get goofy and I'm like, all right, and say silly things. But that's my personality. That's okay. If it's not your personality, then you don't want to try to do that. You still have to be who you are.
Yeah.
But when you're excited about something, you're like, oh my gosh, this happened, or you're passionate about some story you're telling to encourage people or motivate people, let that excitement shine through, though.
Yeah. There's a saying that goes something like, an amateur will practice something until they get it right, and then a professional will practice something until they can't get it wrong.
Yeah, yeah,
So like practice
absolutely.
makes a big difference. Definitely.
And that actually, it makes me think as well. This was I think it was it Bruce Lee? Uh-oh, I think so. But I trained in martial arts for a while, and you can do 10,000 kicks. You can
Hmm.
become an expert at one kick by doing it 10,000 times. So when you do it over and over and over, and you just keep making it better, just that little bit better every time, and get more and more comfortable with it, and you know it inside and out. So then when you add a new story to your repertoire, it doesn't feel so challenging, even though you've added something different, because you've been speaking, you've been telling those stories, weaving them into whatever your presentation might be or whatever, in a way that it just doesn't feel as awkward anymore.
Hmm. So I have sounds like you have two boys, right?
Uh-huh.
Two sons. I have
Yes.
four children actually. I have two boys and two girls. And
Awesome.
question for you is what's your experience like raising boys?
Oh my gosh. So having taught girls, like mostly forever, when I was pregnant with my first son, I was convinced he was a girl. I was like, it's got to be a girl. I mean, what would I do with a boy? I have no idea. Mind you, he danced for many, many years. But I can't even imagine having raised a girl. After raising those boys, I cannot imagine having raised a girl. Now, my boys, my oldest especially, he'll be 28. He's an awful lot like mom, but he's also very, very masculine, more than me by far. But they're respectful of other people. I see that in them. They are ADHD, so they got that genetically. I couldn't do much about that. But um, one of the big things for me is I've always allowed them to be who they are. I never wanted them to conform. Obviously, if they're, as long as they're not hurting someone emotionally, physically, anything like that, they don't need to conform. Be who you are. Teachers didn't always like me because I was like, well, but it's been a big thing, and I know that by putting them out there and in a way, my oldest, by putting him on stage, he actually came back to me a few years ago after going through basic training for the Air Force and blew me away because he said, Mom, all those years that you taught me all that stuff about how to be on stage and the show must go on, how to persevere, all those things in dance class. That's how I got through basic training. Couldn't have done it without that. That was his view.
Hmm.
And I was just blown away. And my youngest one, we just did just paid attention to what he needed as far as his education instead of just doing straight public school. So he had a more flexible education and then graduated early. So and I'm not bragging, I'm just saying it worked for him, and
Hmm.
it's listening to them. So that would go with girls too, right? But boys and I are not much boys anymore, but anyway, my sons and I are just really close, and I trust them to be men
Hmm.
instead of over mothering them, right? Because they are men. And I respect them from that perspective. Like, make a decision. If you want my advice, I will share it with you. But if you don't want it, I won't even give it to you. It's totally fine.
Yeah. What kind of going through your ups and downs of your
Mm.
life, your career, your businesses, what have you learned as far as managing money?
Yeah. I mean, isn't that a good question for a lot of people, right? So, my first one, right? Like I said, when I was 19, 18, 19, and I got a loan. I didn't. My parents got a loan to build my first dance studio because I was a 19-year-old kid. I couldn't get a loan yet. But they never paid a penny of it. I paid all of it. So I just balanced my budget. I just always paid close attention to what I was spending, how much I could spend, and what had to be set aside for the upcoming bills. And I still do that to this day. That money, as far as I'm concerned, is already spent. It's set aside. I don't touch it. I just don't touch it. So that component, and then knowing what it's like to lose everything after having multiple six-figure income, pushing it was over 500,000 a year, and then you all of a sudden have nothing. It was so humbling. And so I'm just really mindful of always putting back in my businesses, always putting money back into it, always trying to grow it, always investing, whether it's technology or a new laptop or coaching, whatever it is, I'm always going to put money back into it because that's really important to see it grow and expand. And then, of course, having money set aside. So, whole nother side note, but this last summer, uh, August of 2023, I had a dog and a pig story, but I ended up completely breaking both bones in my leg at the ankle, and I could not walk for 3 months. It
Wow.
was horrible, horrible. Plate and a bunch of screws. Maybe I have a screw loose. Who knows now? But I lost a ton of money. Right? I couldn't do anything. I was going to launch the new business, and I had to put it on hold. And so many things happened, and all of a sudden, you've got these big medical bills too, and insurance only pays so much. And so recouping, getting back to having a nice savings, and yesterday going, oh, my Jeep needs new shoes. And I was just able to go do it. No big deal. So it's really important to not just spend, spend, spend. You have to really be mindful. And then as far as the business goes, how can you grow it? How can you grow it so that you're happy and that it still gives you the energy and the drive to want to grow it? to whatever capacity you're looking at. Does that make
Hmm.
sense?
Yeah. How do you like through ups and downs in your life? How did you, or where did you turn to help you persevere through that? If you turn to anything.
Um, One for me that I often talk about is when I was in Texas. We had moved, so my then husband and I had moved to Texas, and we had the one son at home, and he was only 10 at the time. And so this is a brand new state, brand new city. We were in the Fort Worth area. And within a couple of months, something happened that I said, no more, I'm done. And there I was in a brand new state, new city. I didn't know anybody. I had my kid and my ex-husband who moved into an apartment across from me so I could see my apartment anyway. um, so to find a martial arts studio. It's something that I'd always wanted to do. And so I found that, and I just started out doing kickboxing just for fitness. And within a couple of weeks or so, I said, well, wait a minute, what's that class after me? What are you guys doing? And they were a bunch of guys training in jujitsu. And I'm like, I want to do that. I'm like, that looks crazy. I want to do that. And it is hard. But I did that and I trained for a couple of years. And those guys and a handful of ladies became my family. And doing the training, and anybody that's ever trained in martial arts pretty much would very likely might tend to agree that it becomes kind of a spiritual practice. It's almost a meditative state in a sense. So you can really get so focused on it, and it really helps you have discipline as well as just a sense of peace and inner peace. That helped me tremendously. So, and mind you, a good friend of mine at the time, she was like, oh, but that's like violent. And it's not really, but it's aggressive. I'll agree with that. She was like, you should do yoga. And I'm like, but I do it. It wasn't what fulfilled me. So
Hmm.
I found what would lift me up so that I could get through the really bad days. And then beyond that, even though I didn't have anyone living close to me, my closest family and friends completely circled the wagons. I did spend a lot of time on the phone, going over the stuff that was happening and just getting through it all. And then there was a point eventually that my son that's in the Air Force, I ended up going and taking my other son, and we went and stayed in Louisiana for a few months with them, which was amazing to have that time again with my older son and his wife, and just to go. I don't know where I want to go. I was ready to just move and change things up, and I'm like, where do I want to go? I don't know. So it was a beautiful time, and just to have that close relationship with all of us again, and yeah. So I'm the crazy one that's willing to sell or give things away if they don't fit in the Jeep. If they fit in the Jeep, they go with me, including my youngest son and the dog. So it's how I ended up on the border of Mexico and Arizona. So
So you're a minimalist.
I have regained some things because we have settled right now. But admittedly, the last time yeah, when I came here, I said, you know what? I don't want the big house. I want the tiny house. So it's not like an actual tiny house, but she's pretty small. But that's what I wanted. And I'm like, we don't need much right now. I want to invest in the business. So it goes back to the financial piece. Don't overdo it on things necessarily. If you're wanting to grow something, then where can you come up with that money? Well, my house payment's not as big. So, that was something I chose. And my son, still living at home, was totally like, that's cool, mom. I want to see you, whatever. So,
Yeah. When you get through like stress in life, like how do you manage stress?
since I'm not training currently, probably because I've always been an athlete of some level, right? Dancer, gymnast, and then martial arts, that always worked out the toxins and the feel good hormones again were released. So that's a big part of it. Me, like I said, when I do the grocery delivery, actually that's physical labor. So actually that relieves stress. But music is my go to. I just play whatever, and my playlist can range from the heavier stuff to not classical, but really softer music. So you just never know what's going to be coming out the windows of the Jeep. But
Yeah. When you were taking when you got your master's and your PhD in psychology, like what was like most surprising thing that you learned about human psychology?
Wow, the most surprising thing. Well, I'm actually going to back up to my undergrad because I took every possible psychology class that my college had. All my electives were psychology based. I was very fascinated. Okay, so here's what I had to think about it for a minute. It's such a good question. So I did a psychology of women's class. Now, I'm not on a male bashing thing at all, not at all. And I'm not like this crazy feminist, right? But we had to do a research project, and we had to watch cartoons and something else that would from television that would give us this relationship of how women are portrayed versus men.
Hmm.
And so at that time, MTV was still enough that you could watch it, for a few hours. So I had to watch a certain amount of hours of that and cartoons. And cartoons that as a Gen Xer I grew up with, even as well as the newer ones. This would have been the early 2000s, right? I was so blown away how, so sadly, so many music videos, at least at that time, as well as the cartoons, were portraying women as having to be the ones that were saved or just sexualizing us. And I'm like, what the flip? That's, and so interestingly enough, as now AI is a big thing, right? I'm liking it, I'm using it. But I've noticed even with that, and I have my chat GPT, for example, it uses my brand voice and my colors, the whole thing, it does really well. All of my images that are on my website or any of my social media anymore, I've created them with AI. So it's a cool thing to be able to do. But I often have to get it to stop sexualizing the women in the images. I'm like, stop dressing her like that, avoid showing her stomach or whatever. So it's still shocking to me that here we are in 2024 or 20 years ago that women are still looked at that way. And it's not just the men that do it, it's other women that do it. Or we
Hmm.
don't look at ourselves as being capable of doing things. I don't realize sometimes that I guess sometimes I'm an enigma, that I'm so strong and confident to go out there and let people see me for who I am. And that still blows my mind. I'm like, why don't other people just, why are you afraid to do that?
Do you think the pendulum is kind of swinging the opposite direction more so now, like with movies and shows where women are portrayed as the heroes, pretty much, in a lot of again movies and shows on Netflix. Do you think it was kind of like on one side now it's like swinging way to the other side?
I don't
Yeah.
think it's swinging far yet, but it will swing. I mean, if you really do a lot of research on that, and of course, my transpersonal psychology degree talks about masculine and feminine energy. And so that does shift over long periods of time. And we were talking about my sons earlier, and they are both what I would say pretty well integrated with their, if we want to talk from that energy place, their masculine and their feminine energy, or their really strong and softer side, however you want to put it. They're they have that pretty integrated. They're pretty good. They're very good nurturers when they want to be, but they're really strong men. So I think, and I feel like I see that in quite a few millennials. I don't know about a ton of Gen Zers yet, but I'm not saying they aren't. I just not around as many of them. So I think that it's starting to blend more than it was. To be, I just wasn't expecting it to still be as far one side as it is versus being a little more middle ground, because we are different. Men are different than women, and when we really look to what our strengths are and respect each other for those strengths, we should use those things and not try to say, well, you can't do this, or I don't need you to help me do that. Because I think it's important. Hey, if I can't reach something, or if I can't get something tightened up because I'm not strong enough, I'm not going
Yeah.
to be all upset because I can't do it. But you just go ask for help. I mean, but it doesn't matter to me. It doesn't matter if it's a man or a woman, as long as they can help me. We should be able to ask for help, which is something that a lot of people have a hard time doing, not just women.
Do you think that society kind of like the whole thing about equal, like being pushed, like everybody's equal? I mean, is there's like equal in value, but there's differences, like even you mentioned, right, between men and women. There's a difference in whether it's a role or whether it's even like physical differences, right? So like we can
Absolutely.
definitely, like our value, our internal value is equal, but when it comes to our interactions and what we contribute to one another, it's different. Like it's not one is better than the other or more than the other. It's just not the same. So like from that
Right.
perspective, it's not equal, but it's not. There's no like one is better than the other.
Exactly. It's just about really knowing who you are and really bringing your strengths forward and being okay with the things that you're not as good at, or that whether it's physical or intellectually or whatever it is. And I say it all the time. It's like, if I can't do it, I'll hire that out. So it's, or learn from someone that knows what they're doing. And for that matter, who did I learn the most from with jiu-jitsu? I went to the guys. I trained with the big dogs. I went to the men. Now, there were some really great women that were around that area, but for whatever reason, I wanted to go learn from the guys because they probably had trained longer, most of them. In that time frame, there weren't that many women black belts in jiu-jitsu. It was very, very minimal. So, yeah, I went and trained with who I thought would do best. And I resonate, and because sometimes I'm very straightforward and I am a big decision maker. So sometimes I can relate to the guys, sometimes a little easier than some of the ladies. It just depends. So, yeah, I just found my people. And I think that we should do that in any capacity. But that doesn't mean that, as you kind of just said, that we should never just blanket it like, well, men should never do blah, 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 because they can't, or women shouldn't get to do such and such because whatever. Because then you just put a blanket over everybody and you stereotype them all, and that doesn't even make sense to me, because we're all individuals. So we're all different. Um, because
Yeah.
even physically, right? If we think about it, there's some women that are much more physically, they're stronger than some guys.
Yeah.
It just depends, right? So I think it should just be looked at um, individually. I
Hmm.
really do.
From psychological perspective, what do you think about like how much our society has influence on us, where it changes us without us being aware of it or without us thinking about it?
Oh, yeah. It's the things that we see. It is the authoritative figures that we have in our life, whether that's someone that we have consistently, teachers, parents, ministers, or whatever, or ones that maybe you don't see constantly, but are firefighters, any of our first responders, that they have that level of authority, right? Law enforcement, those types of things. Our political leaders, yeah, they have a big impact on what we believe should or shouldn't be. And we can be led in a direction by their things that they say, or if they keep saying it over and over. And I don't mean to go political, but that is a thing. If somebody keeps telling you something over and over and over, you can end up choosing to believe it, even if it's actually blatantly not true. But that can happen with a parent doing that to a child too. So it doesn't have to be, some political thing or whatever. So it's just what, even to the point where, what did I do the other day? And it's not laying here because I put it up, but I went out and bought a new iPhone. Why? Well, I kind of needed it, but I didn't need the top of the line one. But what did I do? Well, that's what I wanted. Why? Probably because I've been fed a lot of marketing because I'm an Apple person. And so they're like, ooh, we know that she's this kind of person. Jeep people, Apple people, we're the adventurers, the explorers. They understand our mentality and they do what they should do with their brand and they feed us this idea. Oh my gosh, I watched the Super Bowl because I love football. I watched the Super Bowl this year, but there were so many things with some of the commercials and the different things that they were bringing in that the people I was watching it with made the comment, you know what? They're feeding to these young girls that are Taylor Swift fans because Taylor was of course, at the Super Bowl because of um, Kelsey. What is his name? Now I can't even say his name.
Travis Kelsey.
Yeah, Travis Kelsey. I was going to say that didn't sound right, but okay.
Yeah.
So here I say I'm a big football fan, but the Seahawks. But anyway, so, you know, they fed to that. But that's marketing and corporate America. It is what it is. So they know how to play to that, but it says, oh, this is what you should do. This is what you should be watching. Let's
Mhm.
get these younger girls to watch football because they might see, Taylor. So yeah, the societal beliefs, the societal pressure that we sometimes have. And it's not just from the whole country, right? Then we have it in our own little subcultures of our communities. So it just keeps going down and all the way down into your own family. So yeah, I completely, yeah. I married the hometown boy, the one I divorced, I was talking about, because there was some cultural pressure
Mhm.
from where I came from that was telling me, well, it's not okay to be, because that was my second marriage, but they were saying, oh, you shouldn't be a single mom. You're divorced. You got a baby already, a son. You should be married again to the hometown boy, not someone that we don't know.
Mhm.
And I kind of, okay, as me, big Miss Personality, a strong woman, but I still, in that, I was like, okay. And I backed down at that time.
What would you suggest for people to help themselves figure out if they're being influenced or whether they're actually making decisions themselves? Like if there's like mass media or whatever, like whatever environment they're in, how what are some tools that a person can figure out how to think for themselves?
One, the first thing that comes to mind is, does it really feel good to you? Does it feel right here or in your gut? If you just feel intuitively that you're like, this isn't right, this isn't what I want, then yeah, you should lean more towards the direction you want. Um, there's a fine line there. You have to be mindful. You know, you have to be there. Like in my example, I had children, or I had a child with the one thing I was talking about a minute ago. But so you have to be mindful of that. Anybody that's responsible and leans on you, or if you're responsible for things in a particular job or other people's lives or livelihood or whatever the case may be. But it's really important to pay attention what's going on in here. Is the soul listening? Are you listening rather to your soul and what it's telling you to do? And I'm not trying to get like super deep spiritual on you, but just, does it feel right in your gut? And then find that thing that lifts you up, whatever it is. Find something. I don't care if it's just sitting out in the grass in the yard or going on a hike, or I'm being very nature oriented, but
Mhm.
whatever it is, going down to seeing some new up and coming country music star if you live in Nashville, right? Whatever. I don't know. Go sing karaoke, whatever. Go find something that lifts you up and gets you back into the space of being you and connected with who you really, really are. And then you will feel more confident and stronger to make the decisions that feel the best to you.
Mhm. How do you decide whatever information is being presented to you or comes across to you, whether that's true or not true? How do you pull the truth out of whatever's out there?
That's a tough one. I mean, It's experience. I hate to say it, y'all. That's experience. It's age. Because you're going to have to crash and burn. You're going to have to experience the crap to know that that was the bad stuff. I I hate to break it to you, but you just have to go through it, and then you go, oh, I've been there. I know what that's like, right? Or if we're looking relationship wise, here I am single, and I'm like, oh, red flag, I'm out. So because I've experienced some really unpleasant things in life, and we do that's to me that's a big part of the human life, is to have a lot of lessons so that we can grow from them.
Hmm.
I sound so
And you,
spiritual on you today. I apologize.
well, I was going to ask you the question on follow up on that. Actually, you mentioned spirituality a few times. Like, what does that mean to you? Like, what is spirituality to you?
It's very, very personal experience. It is. I was raised in the Baptist church, but I left that when I was like 13 years old, and because something didn't feel right. And my father was not very happy with me over it, but at the time, and it was decades later that that particular minister was doing a sermon for a very dear family friend of ours. So I was sitting in the family section in the during the funeral service. So I couldn't get up and walk out, but that's the only reason I didn't, because he cut down women and he cut down people of color during that funeral sermon. And
Mhm.
I was like, well, this is why. And so it ruined it for me. But I'm also not, obviously, I rebel against some levels of authority. And I'm not one for dogma. And I don't think that there's just one possible way. There are so many different ways to interpret anything. And there's no way to truly know and interpret words that were written thousands of years ago that weren't written down for thousands of years. The stories were just orally told. So, and I'm not just bashing Christianity, but I am just deeply spiritual, but it's not one tradition. And I've studied Buddhism, I've studied different things because my graduate education was a big part of that.
Mhm.
So it's there's something bigger than us, right? We wouldn't be able to have those gut instincts and just know things sometimes without knowing it. Like, how do we know that? So there's something there, um, but just trust in what makes the most sense to you and feels the best to you. And if that is attending church every Sunday, then go do it. But just don't be so hard on other people. Be respectful of other people and show love and light to other people.
Yeah. Um, as far as sorry, I'm more. You probably have noticed I'm an introvert, so like to me, like I don't have too many reactions to things.
That's
I've
okay.
uh, kind of some of these podcasts I've watched with my wife, and she's like, "You're not even like saying anything or whatever after somebody answers. Like you don't have any reaction." It's like so that's part of like storytelling. That's something I'm trying to get better at, but haven't.
That's okay.
So maybe someday I'll need to practice and get better at it. But so we talked about kind of your story. We talked about uh, your businesses and money questions and so on. One thing that you alluded to, kind of sports and martial arts. How do you maintain kind of a good physical health? What do you do anything special? Is there any kind of like tips that you would recommend to somebody else? How do you
It
how do you
really,
keep up a good physical health, basically?
it really, it depends on the person, right? For me, if I had a place to train that I felt really comfortable, I would probably be training in jujitsu. But I would kickboxing is what changed my physique. Um, but I cut out sugar for the most part recently. I just did that October, so October 2023. And though I'm not a big person, and I never have been, I actually dropped like 25 pounds. Like, it just melted it off. But I am very physically active. And so I still go out and I walk a lot and I do a lot of lifting. And it just depends on, I had a big back issue. And then, of course, I broke my leg. And so I had to figure out things that would do right by me and make me feel good. Um, but yeah, just sitting down and being at your desk all the time, that's not good for us. We have to go out and be active. But I think too, it's what our bodies want. Like, because I've always been an athlete and always been so active, my body craves that. But
Hmm.
not everybody needs that, right? So it's all subjective, I think.
Yeah. And when you cut out the sugar, did you cut out just sugar, like pure sugar, or kind of processed food, or what does that look like?
The biggest thing that I really paid attention to was getting those added sugars and refined sugars out. Then I did gradually add some things back in. I have, my coffee creamer of a morning has sugar now again. I don't think, I didn't worry about that. But I just really paid attention. And to be honest, I didn't realize how much sugar I was consuming. An apple, sure, that's natural. But when you're going, oh my gosh, it had this many, what, added to it? I was just not, I was really, way to go. I couldn't believe that I was putting so much of that junk in my system. And I just always had done it. And just, I had blood work done and after my leg and all those things. And they said, oh, you're pre diabetic. I'm like, whatever, not possible. And because I was like 150 pounds and I'm 5'4", so it's not big. And that was it for me though. And I said, nope, I'm done. I'm out. And you're not giving me any medication. I don't want medication. And so I just cut it all out and wanted to make sure my cholesterol or something like that didn't get high. And I just changed it. But I had never changed it for my own, like, oh, I want to drop 25 pounds. That wasn't enough of a drive. It had to be them going, oh, you might have a health issue. And it's like, oh, nope, we're fixed that right now. We're done. That's all it took for
Yeah.
me. So, yeah.
Yeah. So when it comes to your current business, Storytelling Rebel, and Speaking Coach, can you tell a little bit more about what you do within your business? Like what offerings or what services do you offer?
So there's two things that are really exciting about it. One is I'm launching, because I've podcasted for freaking ever, but I'm launching a new podcast, Cartwheels and Banana Peels, Funny Tales for Women Entrepreneurs. So I'm doing it a little different than most podcasts, right? We are actually going to have 4 or 5 of us, 3 or 4 of us rather, sitting around a virtual table in Zoom and sharing funny stories. So everybody gets to tell what they do. But
Hmm.
then everybody shares a funny story. We have a lot of great laughs. And then, of course, they get to make some sort of an offer at the end for listeners. So we're going to be airing that. And so that's such an exciting piece. And the women are just over the top excited. And I have guys asking me to be on too. So I'm like, oh, we might have to have like a bonus session every once in a while where it's the men, even though it's very branded for women. But what I really focus on is helping them find those stories that they don't even know exist. They're like, I don't have any funny stories or humorous stories. And we start having a conversation. I'm like, there's one. There's one. And then being able to help them learn how to relate it to different things in their business so that they can weave it into either a talk or a podcast interview or a networking moment or social media or marketing of whatever kind.
Hmm.
One of the first things that I love to do is help them get I call it an elevator story versus an elevator pitch, but it's the same thing, so that they can do that in less than 20 seconds. So when you go to a networking event, right, you sometimes have 30 seconds, sometimes 60 seconds to say what you do. How many times have you been sitting there or been the one that's done it and you're listening and your eyes glaze over and you are looking for an exit because you're like, okay, and you have no idea at the end what that person does. You're either confused or you were just bored out of your mind. And I mean, hey, I've been that person that just rambled on. Obviously, I'm a talker, but I learned how to tell what I do and make it very concise and pretty clear in under 10 seconds. And then if somebody's interested, then you get to have a further conversation. And so when you're telling stories, if you share a funny story, be able to relate it to something that you're doing. And it, because when you can make people laugh or feel good or entertain them on some level, like we said earlier, it just breaks the ice. It makes things so much easier. There are times that people will be like, I got to work with him or I got to work with her. I'm not sure what she does, but I need to work with her because they like you.
Yeah.
So those things are really helpful too.
So you're starting the podcast. What other services do you offer to others, like your clients?
So I'm doing, of course, I'll offer VIP days, and I will be offering a 90-day program to really dive in and to find their stories. It is very bespoke or personalized because they might be wanting to work on an entire signature talk. And so, hey, we
Mhm.
need to work on all that over those 90 days. Or maybe they want to just come up with what I call their back pocket stories. So they have those 5 or 10 stories that they're ready to pull one out whenever, when it goes, oh, this is that moment, this story is going to fit. And they're already prepared with it. So those are things that those are the main pieces. I have like a really cool thing that'll end up being a big show when it's all done. Put people back on stage. It'll be so amazing. But what I'm doing, because I'm designing my business around my life,
Mhm.
and I have done this from the other side of the coaching piece of it, is I'm doing it via Voxer, which for anyone that doesn't know, Voxer is basically, it's considered a walkie-talkie app. It's kind of like doing your audios if you do an audio conversation back and forth in Facebook Messenger. It's not that different from that, though you can hear each other live time even. So I'm doing all of my coaching. I'm switching to that where I'm doing all the coaching via Voxer. So it's complete
Mhm.
flexibility. And when you're talking about storytelling, it's perfect because I can give some information or feedback or a prompt or something, and then the client has time to think about it and go, oh, okay. And then they respond. And then I have time to mull over what they've said and respond. So it's perfect. It makes them have access to me unlimited throughout those 90 days. And, I have my office hours Monday through Friday that I respond, but it's really cool because it gives such flexibility to everybody and it just puts it at your fingertips.
So it's like texting, but with voice.
Hmm. Yep. And,
Okay, so it's
you can
asynchronous,
still
like it's
text.
yeah.
Sorry.
So it's not like a phone call or a video call where
Right.
it's a synchronous thing. It's asynchronous where you just respond
Yep.
afterwards.
Hmm.
Okay,
Yeah, very much
nice.
so. Yeah, it's really great. And you can share with Voxer, you can share documents. And so, yeah, it's really cool.
Yeah. Where can people find more about the services that you offer and to connect with you?
Storytellingrebel.com.
Okay.
And yes, I'm on LinkedIn and I'm on Facebook. Most of my stuff that I post is on LinkedIn. I just like it better. But yeah, you can, if you want to have a conversation going, oh, I want to know how to, like, can you help me with my stories? There's a place right on storytellingrebel.com above the fold that you click on it and you can schedule a time to have a chat with me as well. So
Yeah. Anything else you'd like to share with the audience?
go and do some cartwheels. Oh, no. If you haven't done one, call first responders first, just in case. Don't break your leg. So I didn't break my leg, remember, by doing cartwheels. It was, like I said, a dog and a pig story. So just have fun, though. I mean, just be who you are. And if you're introverted, there's nothing wrong with that because your people would probably be a little bit more comfortable with that than Miss Big Personality, right? So it has to be those people that are going to relate to you. And when you share something, you think it's funny and you want to share it, but you go, oh, nobody's going to want to hear that. That's stupid. No, 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 no. Remember, your people are going to want to hear it because they're going to get it. It's going to make sense to them. And when you do something or say something that turns people away, guess what? Yay, you repelled the wrong people.
Hmm.
If they're not your right client or customer, then you don't want them anyways, and they don't want you. You're not benefiting them, and they're not going to benefit you in the long run because they won't have great success, which is not going to help your reputation. So be who you are. Don't be afraid of being who you are. And then just, yeah, practice, 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 and get a coach for whatever it is you're doing. It doesn't have to be storytelling, but don't be afraid to get that help that gives you the support that you need.
Yeah, that's great advice. So one more question for you before you go. What does the world need more of today?
Puppies. No, I'm just kidding. We have too many puppies that don't have homes, but they're cute. I think we need more. Hang on, I want to think about that for a second. My gut reaction was laughter. We need more laughter. I'm going to stick with that because think about it. Can you imagine if we're at in a battle and the guys and the women are in combat and then they just started laughing? There would be no fight. There would be no war. I mean, if we could, and then that's like the utopian idea, I realize. But if if we could have more laughter, we're going to feel better, which means that's the ripple effect. Everybody around us starts feeling better.
Yeah. Well, Jaycie, thank you so much for sharing your story and sharing some tips about storytelling. Yeah.
Thank you. I appreciate being here today.